Okay. All right. So in the lab exercises, which I'll be posting those as well, you're going to get a lot of pictures of what tissue looks like under a microscope. Okay, we got some stuff here as well, and there's just more of it on the lab handout. But you'll notice, okay, here's lung, and then they enlarge what the lung tissue would look like. And then here's what it looks like under a microscope. Okay, so this is an animation. Here's the real picture of it, of what you would normally see under a microscope. Okay, so before we can get into why this has its shape and name and all that, we got to cover this part. Okay, so when they name epithelial tissue, they are named, okay, they are named according to the number of cell layers and the shape of the cells. Okay, so how many layers? Is it one layer? Or is it 2 layers or more? Okay. And then is it shaped kind of like a fish scale? Is it shaped like a cube? Is it shaped like a column? Okay, so they're named after the number of cell layers and the shape of the cell. Okay. In histology, in the histology world, we don't say one layer, we say simple. Okay, so if you go up, if someone is laying bricks and they only laid one layer of bricks, and I ask you, in histology terms, how many layers of bricks did they lay? You're going to say simple, because it's just one layer. If it is 2 or more, okay, so 2 or more layers, we don't, in histology, we don't say, oh, it's multi-layered, oh, it's 5 layers. We just simply say stratified. Okay, so stratified means more than one layer. Okay, here's another way of looking at that. Simple, which is one layer, is very thin. Okay, that's a very thin layer. Stratified is multiple layers, so it's very thick. Okay, it's a thick layer. Okay. Okay, now this next thing I'm going to say, write this down. This will help you with narrowing down the function of tissue. If it is simple, if the layer is simple, meaning very thin, thin tissue is good for, so the function of thin tissue, think diffusion, absorption, secretion. Okay. So the function, so if you're making your note cards, on the front side of the note card, you would say something like this. What is the function of simple epithelial tissue, which means it's one cell layer thin? And on the back side, you would say it's good for diffusion, absorption, and secretion. Okay. It is very difficult for things to be absorbed through something that's very thick. Things do not like to diffuse through very thick tissue. Okay, so it has to be thin. Stratified, because it's thick, this is good for protection. Okay. Thick tissue is better for protection. Okay, I'm going to use a motorcycle analogy here. If you're riding a motorcycle and for some reason you put the bike down and you're going to fall and hit the asphalt, do you want to be wearing a t-shirt and shorts, or do you want to be wearing a helmet and a leather jacket, and basically motorcycle armor? Well, of course, people would say, well, I'd rather have the armor. Why? Because it's thick. It's more protective. I'm not going to get road rash if I'm wearing all this stuff because it's very thick. Okay. So your epithelial tissue that is stratified there to protect you. Okay. Then we have transitional epithelial tissue, which means it is in transition. It has the ability to be stretched. So it can go from a non-stretched position to a stretched position, and it can go back and forth, kind of like an ACE bandage, which is elastic. You can take the ACE bandage that's elastic and you can stretch it and then let it go back to its original shape. Stretch it, it can go back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so that's transitional epithelium. It's in transition constantly. It can change shape. Okay, then you have pseudostratified. Okay, you have pseudostratified. So pseudo means false. Stratified means 2 or more layers. Okay, so this gives the false appearance that it's multi-layered. So that's why they call it pseudified or pseudo. Okay, those are the layers and what they look like and the names they give them. Now let's look at shape. Okay, so if the cell under a microscope looks like a fish scale, they call it squamous. If it's shaped like a cube, they call it cuboidal. And if it's shaped like a column, they call it columnar. Okay. All right. So let's do a little practice round here. If you're looking at tissue and it's one cell layer thin and shaped like a fish scale, what would they call it?
Simple squamous.
Beautiful. Perfect. Okay, one more. It is multiple layers and shaped like a column. Multiple layers and shaped like a column. What would they call it?
Stratified columnar.
Good. Okay, so that's kind of as easy as that. Okay. So that's the histology language. All right, so let's dive into some for real examples here. So the first one is simple. This is in no particular order, okay? Here's your simple squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, there's a test question. So function, diffusion, okay, filtration. All right, where do we find this? It's found in the blood vessels. Okay, so your tubes, your blood vessel tubes, where you find the red blood cells. It's found in the lining of the heart. And then found in the lungs. So over here, they're showing you a picture of the lungs. Okay, so there's lung, and then what it would look like on an animation. So there's that fish-like scale. So there's one, there's one, there's one, okay, and so on. And you also notice that it is one cell layer thin. Okay, it's kind of like just one layer of bricks. Okay, so when you look at it under a microscope, this one, let me go back to, okay, this one's a little bit better picture of the lung tissue. Okay, so there it is. There's your, looks like a fish scale. Okay. And there's your layer, one cell layer thin. And when we look at it for real under a microscope, you can see there's a boundary. That's the tissue. Okay, so all those those circles, so to speak here, that is the actual piece of tissue. Now, inside of here, this is a space. And because this is lung, you're going to find oxygen in here and carbon dioxide. Okay. Okay, and then what happens is gas gets exchanged through the tissue. All right, hold on one sec. Okay, so let's go back to this one. Okay, the next one, simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, so simple, one cell layer thin, shaped like a cube. So if you go over here to take a look, shaped like a cube. Okay. And then you also notice that it is one layer of bricks, one cell layer thin. So automatically, you should be thinking diffusion, secretion, absorption, because it's thin. Okay. We would find this in the kidneys. So under a microscope, you can see it has these cube-like shapes, and it's also one cell layer thin. Okay. Now, if you think about the kidneys, you want the kidneys to be able to allow, water to pass through it. It's also a big filter. So as things are passing through the kidney tissue, your kidney knows how to keep the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff. Okay. So in A&P2, you'll talk about kidneys, and in pathology, you'll talk about kidneys. And those of you who are going to work in a hospital, you're going to see lots of kidney issues, and if you're doing renal dialysis stuff with people, you're going to see kidney issues. So in other words, kidney problems are very dangerous. Okay. The kidneys do a lot of things for you, lots of stuff. But the quick version is, here it is with kidneys, they keep the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff in your body. So it is there to help keep your body more purified. Okay, that's a major kidney function. So if these cells that you're looking at, this simple cuboidal epithelium, if they get hurt and keep getting hurt, then in the long run, your kidney is not going to work. They will lose their function, and that person is screwed. Okay. And they might be on the kidney, transplant list, and they're going into DaVita, which is a big company around here that does renal dialysis. And it's just miserable, okay? Okay, simple columnar epithelium. So simple, there's your one cell layer thin, and it's shaped like a column. And you find these in the gastrointestinal system. So your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine. Okay, it's one cell layer thin, so absorption, secretion, because it has glands. Okay. And it's your GI system, so it's absorbing nutrients. And you're also secreting digestive enzymes. Okay, and all sorts of gastric juices and stuff like that. Okay, we'll talk more about the GI in A&P2. So we'll get to look in more detail as to what all the different cells in the GI system do in A&P2. All right, pseudo-stratified. So pseudo is false. A false-looking multi-layered tissue, so pseudo-stratified. Okay, its job is to secrete mucus. And earlier I mentioned mucus is a protective function. Okay, your mucus layer protects you. And I use if you ever had a respiratory infection and you've got the excessive mucus production, well, that's because it's moving the foreign particles away from the lung field. That's why it comes up into your throat and you kind of spit it out, right? That's your sputum. Now, if you're actually sick and symptomatic, you feel that. Okay? When you're not symptomatic, when you're not sick, this process is still happening. You're just not aware of it. Okay? So your respiratory passageway is constantly moving particles away from the lung field. And when you're not symptomatic, you don't even notice it, even though it's there constantly protecting you. Now I'm going to add a word here, and that's the cilia. Okay, so actually this would be called ciliated. Ciliated, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Okay, that's a more accurate word. Ciliated, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So if you look closely, you can see the cilia. Okay, that little fuzz right there, that's the cilia. Okay, and you're like, well, what the heck is cilia? Well, cilia are these little hair-like projections, that are constantly moving particles away from the lung field. Okay, so when you see the word cilia, think hair-like projections that are moving particles in a certain direction. Okay, so in the trachea, or excuse me, in the lung field, which is the trachea, okay, it's moving particles away from the lung field. In the fallopian tube, okay, in women, in the fallopian tube, it moves the egg from the ovaries to the uterus. Okay, the cilia, hair-like projections, their job is to move particles, move stuff. And depending on where you find it in the body depends on what it's moving. So in the fallopian tube, it moves the egg from point A to point B, from ovaries to uterus. Okay, stratified squamous. Okay, stratified means multiple layers. Okay, there's our thick stuff, right? So it's thick. And look at that, function, protection against abrasion. Okay. So if you look over here, you can see there's many layers of bricks. Many, many, many layers of bricks. Definitely more than one layer. So there's your stratified. Okay, where do you find it? You find it in the skin. Find it in the mouth. Okay, some reproductive tissue. Think about the mouth, right? If you ever go to, say, Starbucks or whatever, and you get a coffee, a hot coffee, the coffee is usually around 150 degrees. When they give it to you, it's usually around 150 degrees. That's hot. Imagine getting in a hot tub that's 150 degrees. I think your skin would fall off. But, you know, you can drink it, and for the most part, it's fine. I mean, it might be hot, but like people do it. You know, so the protections, it's pretty tough. It's pretty good. Okay. Yeah, last one, we'll take a break. Transitional epithelium. So that means it's in motion, it's moving. Okay, you find this in the urinary bladder and the uterus. So if you think about it, your urinary bladder, if your bladder is empty, okay, then the cells kind of looks like this. Let me draw a bladder. Here's a bladder, and so this is an empty bladder, and this would be a full bladder. So if it's, and then here's the tubes that bring the urine into the urinary bladder. If it's empty, so that space that I just shaded in, that's where the urine would go. When it fills up, then it looks like that. It's in transition. Okay, let's take a break. Let's take a 15, and then we'll come back. All right, see you in 15. Okay, so connective tissue, loose, adipose, dense, cartilage, bone, and blood. Okay. Okay, loose, also known as areolar connective tissue. It is there for support and some nourishment. Okay, it's found widely throughout the body. Okay, found widely throughout the body. It helps fill the spaces between your glands, muscles, and nerves. Okay, so MM is short for muscles, and NN is short for nerves. So you get in, like, let's say with like with surgery, right? You open up the person, you go inside, and you start to see the muscles and the nerves, okay? And then you'll start to see that there's tissue. There's some tissue that separates them. And that tissue is likely the loose or areolar connective tissue. Okay, the basement membrane of our tissue is usually loose connective tissue. And it also helps attach skin to underlying tissue in the body. Okay, so it's loose, found widely throughout the body. Inside of the loose connective tissue, you'll find these elastic fibers that look like hair. Okay, so that black line there, looks like a hair. So you'll see those spread loosely throughout the tissue, right? So they're just kind of spread everywhere. And that gives it the ability to expand. You'll also notice these collagen fibers. Okay, so there's going to be a type of collagen, which at the end of the day is made from proteins. And that's what gives the tissue its integrity. Okay. It's kind of like putting up your 2x4 frame and then adding the drywall to it. Okay, the 2x4 framework would be kind of like your collagen. It's the frame. It's what you're going to attach things to. It helps with support. Okay, the other thing that you find in the loose connective tissue is some immune properties. Okay, so I usually will, just for fun, I'll draw a Pac-Man. And whenever you see me draw a Pac-Man, what that means is it's our immune system, because Pac-Man eats things, right? Our immune system eats things. Okay. In ANP2 and Patho, we'll get very detailed with the immune system and the components of our immune system. But for now, just to kind of have fun with it, I'll from time to time draw the Pac-Man symbol, because what that means is some of our immune system, some of our immune components that are designed to eat the bad guys are found here. Okay, so one thing that we do find in loose connective tissue is some of our immune system. Another thing that the loose connective tissue is good at is retaining fluid. Okay, so take your ankle, for example. If you roll your ankle, if you sprain your ankle, it swells. Okay, so fluid that is inside of the blood vessels and inside of your lymphatic vessels leak out and go into the loose connective tissue area. Okay, it starts to swell and it can expand pretty big because of the elastic fibers and the collagen. Okay, it's expandable. Okay, adipose tissue is fat. Okay, adipose tissue is our fat. Okay, now fat gets bad press in our culture, right? Everybody feels like they're too fat, they're overweight. Everybody wants to lose weight. Probably the number one thing with a diet. Any kind of diet usually is because people want to lose weight. Okay, fine. But here's the thing, fat actually has some good components to it, okay? You know, just like anything, you don't want too much of anything, you know, too much sugar will kill you or hurt you or whatever. Too much, you know, just too much of anything is not good. But if things are in moderation, it's fine. Okay, everything in moderation. So fat or adipose tissue, it helps with insulation. So it can help keep you warm. It helps protect you, right? So if you have, like take the kidneys, for example, the kidneys have a fat layer around the kidneys and it's designed to protect the kidneys. You know, should you receive, let's say, blunt trauma, like a punch, someone punches you in the kidneys or whatever, yeah, it's going to hurt. But if you have a fat layer around it, it's going to help protect it. I mean, that, you know, why do you think that some of the bouncers and all that at bars are like these usually these really big guys that look like football players, and they usually have a lot of adipose tissue? Okay, try to punch one of those guys in the stomach and see how good that does. They probably didn't even feel it because there's so much protection there. Okay, energy storage. Okay, so I talk what I'm about to say. I'll talk more about this in like ANP2 because we get into the gastrointestinal system. But here's a quick version. If you eat more calories than your body can handle, it is stored in the fat tissue. If you eat more calories, so let's say your body, just to keep the math simple, let's say the way your body is designed, to break even with calories per day, all you need is 2,000 calories. Okay, so you break even. If you only eat 1,000 calories, you should lose weight. If you eat 3,000 calories, then your body's like, well, that's 1,000 calories more than what I need. That no problem. I know where to put it. I will put it in the fat cells because it is a storage site. Okay. Now it's a complicated biochemistry process of how that works. Okay. We'll get into a little bit of that down the road in another class like ANP2. Okay. But for now, just kind of look at it as that's where your body stores the extra calories. Okay. The extra, you know, food particles. It's your body, your digestive system breaks it down and then eventually stores it in fat. So if you keep doing that, then what happens is your fat cell starts to enlarge. You keep doing it and enlarges more and enlarges more because inside there's lots and lots and lots and you know, it's just accumulating more and more and more and more and more over time. Okay. All right. Okay, dense collagenous connective tissue. Okay, dense, so it's thick. It has the ability to withstand a considerable amount of force. So it's got great tensile strength. All right. So try to take a piece of leather and pull it apart. It's tough because that piece of leather strand has great tensile strength. Okay, so that's your dense collagenous connective tissue. You would find it in the tendons and ligaments. So your tendons and ligaments are very strong. They're able to withstand a great pulling force. You also find some of it in the dermis of your skin. Okay, so your skin has, so I went back a slide. So here's your skin. It's got that dermis layer. So it allows it to, have some strength and toughness to it. It's also found in the outer layer of blood vessels. Okay. So your blood vessels actually have 3 layers to it. So you're looking down the barrel of the tube, your blood vessel. Okay. So the outsidemost layer of your blood vessel is a dense collagenous connective tissue, makes it tough, makes it strong. Okay, then you have the dense elastic connective tissue. The word elastic gives it away, has the ability to stretch and recoil, such as found in the vocal cords and in the walls of your large arteries. Now, the large arteries, like your aorta, receive a tremendous amount of fluid, right? So your heart squeezes and pumps fluid, known as blood, into these tubes. It needs to be able to withstand that pressure. Fluid is constantly being pumped in, needs to be able to withstand that. Okay, hyaline cartilage. This is what is found at the end of your bones. Okay, so that it is not bone on bone. So you want cartilage because it's there to protect the end of bones. Of course, as time goes by and you start to eat away at that cartilage, then yeah, it's going to eventually be bone on bone. And that's a big part of my practice. When I treat patients, I've got a very large patient population that has, arthritis, bone problems, cartilage problems. They come in with pain and I'm like, wow, this is like, sometimes it's nasty. I'm like, this looks awful. Let's get an x-ray. Let's see what's going on, or let's get an MRI. And then, when the images come back, sometimes the report is, it's like, hey, your cartilage is gone. It's bone on bone. You need a knee replacement. Okay. Sometimes that happens. Anyway, under normal circumstances, the cartilage should be healthy. It protects bone. Okay, you also find it, it's what your ribs are made of. Okay, so the ribs, let me say that better. You have 2 parts to your ribs. You have the actual bone part of your ribs, and then you have the cartilage part. The cartilage part is in the front that connects to your breastbone, connects to the sternum. Okay, so there's 2 parts to your ribs. You have the cartilage part and the bone part. Okay, down the road when we get to bones, you'll see you'll see what that looks like. But for now, just know that ribs do contain cartilage, and that is what helps it have some flexibility. Okay, so you can breathe, and you can do chest compressions and whatever, and there's some movement there, and the cartilage helps with that. Okay, you also find hyaline cartilage in utero. Okay, so embryological development, the baby's bones are developing, and after the child is born, you have a lot of hyaline cartilage. Okay, that's found in the infant skeleton. Okay, we'll also talk more about that when we get to the bones down the road. Okay, then you have fibrocartilage. Okay, fibrocartilage is found in the discs of the spine. It's capable of withstanding considerable amount of pressure. Okay, so it's found in the IVD, which is intervertebral disc. Okay, so your IVD is also known as the intervertebral disc. This is another thing I see a lot of. Okay, now keep in mind, I'm a more, sports medicine, PT, musculoskeletal clinic. So obviously I see a lot of this, okay, because that's like what I do. People coming in with back pain, and then we take x-rays and MRIs, and it's like, wow, look at all that degeneration and, whatever. Okay, now in healthy circumstances, you want the disc, the fibrocartilage of the disc, you want it to be nice and open and big and healthy and hydrated and functioning. But sometimes, people lose that function and the disc starts to degenerate, and that hurts. It creates a lot of dysfunction. Okay, so they come in and we have all these cool things to try to help them, and it works. I mean, they start feeling better, they start functioning better. So I see a lot of discs. Okay, now granted, people also come in and their discs are fine. Okay, they have carpal tunnel, right? Their wrist hurts, but their spine is fine. Okay. All right. Next one is elastic cartilage. Okay, very flexible. So your ear would be a good example. Okay, the epiglottis is a part found in your throat. It's what covers the when you swallow food and water, the epiglottis covers the trachea, so fluid and food does not go down your windpipe. You want food and fluids to go down your esophagus, which is the food tube. You do not want food to go into the lungs. So the epiglottis protects the trachea, which means it protects your lungs. If that malfunctions, then you're going to get food stuck in the trachea. So now you're choking. And that can be bad, because if you can't breathe, that's going to cause problems. Or the food or the fluid can actually leave the throat area and go into the lungs. Okay, that's not good either. Okay, so usually if that happens, people go in, they take an x-ray, they're like, oh yeah, look at that. We see the food particle or whatever it is in the lungs. We got to get it out. So they get it out. Okay, if there's too much fluid that gets into the lungs, then they can drain that. If not, that can lead to a lot of problems like pneumonia. Okay, bone, another type of connective tissue. Its function is strength, support, a site for muscle and ligament attachment. Okay, also tendons attached to bone, so a site for muscle, ligament, and tendon attachment. Okay, so it's found in our skeletal system. Next type of tissue would be nervous tissue. And this controls everything in your body, right? So the nervous system, the master controlling system of everything in the body. It's the way the brain communicates to the body and the body communicates to the brain. Okay, so let's introduce a little bit of neuro stuff here for you. This concept here, okay, this is called, so here's the brain, here's the body. As the brain communicates to the body, that is called efferent. Okay, efferent. Efferent.
Here's the definition.
Hold on, sorry. There's only one. There's only one R. Sorry about that. Okay, so efferent means it's going from the brain to the body. Okay, let me erase some of this stuff. It's getting a little busy. From the body to the brain is called afferent. Okay, I'll be referencing that here and there throughout the semester, throughout the quarter, especially when we get to the nervous system. Okay, so brain to body, that's how it communicates efferently. And the body communicates to the brain, that's called afferent. In layman's terms, here's another way of saying that. So afferent would be motor, and efferent would be sensory. Okay, so here's an example. If you touch a hot stove with your hand, the information goes from your hand to your brain. That would be sensory. You felt it. And of course, it was hot. Your brain processes the information, and then you have an efferent response. So what would be the motor response if you touched a hot stove? What would be the efferent response?
Removing your hand.
Perfect. So, easy example, right? So sensory in, motor out, body to brain, brain to body. So that's a very simple way of saying that's how we have mass communication from body to brain and brain to body, okay? And all of this is done through electrical transmission, okay, in the form of what's called an action potential. Okay, we'll talk about action potential down the road when we get to muscles, and then later when we get to the nervous system. Okay, this is what it looks like under a microscope. You've got the dendrites. So dendrites bring information into, electrical information into the cell body. Okay, so electricity travels down the dendrites into the cell body. Okay, I'm gonna go through this next thing very quickly because I dive into more detail with this when we specifically get to the nervous system. But with our nervous tissue, it also helps with thought, emotion, reasoning, skill, memory. Okay, your brain is responsible for that stuff. Okay, the cell body contains the nucleus. Okay, so there's your nucleus. It's what you would see under a microscope. You can see it there. Okay, anytime you have nuclear material, in a cell, that is very, very high functioning. Okay, very, very high functioning. Nuclear material, right? So usually it's things like DNA, RNA, the body's ability to synthesize proteins, and all sorts of other fancy things, okay? And so our cells in the human body, you know, pretty much all the cells have a nucleus. I mean, even in the microbial world, such as bacteria and viruses, they also have their own nuclear material, right? So when you look at a bacteria wall and you look inside, you know, it has a nucleus. It knows how to divide. It knows how to replicate.